Hello, I'm Dr. Richard Scott Nokes, and I am the coordinator for the Visiting Scholars program here at Troy University. And today I have three of our visiting scholars, and we're going to talk a little bit about the research that we're doing. Let me tell you a little bit about the program. The Visiting Scholars program is different than international students. International students are young people who've come here primarily to be students. We also have visiting professors, and these are professors who've come to work for us for a year or however long their time is. The Visiting Scholars program is for foreign professors who've come here to do some kind of research, and so we're hosting them during the research. And sometimes they'll sit in on classes sometimes, or occasionally they'll do guest lectures or this kind of thing, but their primary reason to be here is to do research. And part of the Visiting Scholars program requirement is that they have to do a symposium. We do twice a year, we do a symposium, once in the spring and once in the fall, where they present their research to the university community. And normally those presentations are very standard academic presentations. They're maybe a little dry, very scholarly. But this year, because of a variety of circumstances, we have only 3 visiting scholars here at the moment. Very often we have many more. We actually have another one who's arriving in a week. But because we only had 3 at the moment, we decided to take this opportunity just to present this to the broader community. So instead of doing this as the typical symposium, what we've decided to do today is to have this conversation here so that the broader community can hear. I suspect we will not do this next year because I think we'll probably have around 30 visiting scholars next year, so it won't likely work. So let me introduce to you the visiting scholars, and this is not the first time I've met them, but I can never remember their American names, so I actually have to use my notes. So to my immediate right here is Dr. Chun-Yu Jo. She goes by Cora. She's an associate professor at Southwest University of Science and Technology in Sichuan Province, and she specializes in the application of statistics, but she came here to Troy to research critical thinking skills. Next we have Dr. Xian Chun, or Kelly, and she is an associate professor at Hainan University in Hainan Province in the Faculty of Economic Management, and she specializes in public finance, and she came to the United States to research government fundraising mechanisms particularly. And there on the end is Dr. Wen Gong, or Fred. He is an associate professor in the School of Communication and Animation in the Department of Communication, and he specializes in crisis communication, but he came here to study to research aging communication, and he's particularly interested in issues of new media, the kind of new media that we see emerging today. So, Cora, why don't you tell us a little bit about, you came here to study critical thinking. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, I come here to research the critical thinking, and I want to know how to help the Chinese students to build up their critical thinking skills. And I want to compare with the Chinese students and the American students. And critical thinking is defined as a process like the test claims and the arguments and pick out what have value or which do not. So I think maybe the essence of the critical thinking is the evaluation. For example, let me ask you a question. If your daughter asks you, Dad, I think that there is someone told me an opinion that the best career for women is to be a good wife and mother. So what do you tell her?
What I would probably say if my daughter were to say that to me, which is in her case unlikely, but I would probably say, well, we have to think about what do you mean by best in this case, and what is good about being a wife and mother, and what is maybe not as desirable about that, and what would be better in some other circumstance, and to talk through the issue with her.
So that's the critical thinking. I mean, the questions and the probe questions. That's
okay. And so this is what you've come here to study.
Yeah.
And so. Kelly, sorry, forget your American names. Dr. Chun, tell us about Well, the government fundraising mechanisms, and what does that mean, government fundraising? Isn't it just give me your tax dollars?
Yeah, yeah. My research topic is the fundraising system reform of Chinese local government. This has been an important area in recent years for Chinese economy. Fundraising system is the ways for government to raise money there are several ways for government to raise money, and what I'm focusing on is called PPP model. So PPP model stands for public-private partnership model. So that's what I'm focusing on.
Yeah, and so since you're interested in how that reform is happening, essentially you've come here to see other models at work and how they work so you can take them back to China. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I just take I'm focusing on the research on PPP at the moment. Okay. So I read the literatures and the resources here on PPP.
Okay. Yeah. Can you give us an example of PPP? Like what would be an example of what would be a private partnership that the government might have? Yeah, for example, the government needs to provide the infrastructures and some public services for people, such as the education, healthcare, water treatment, those public services. And at the moment, the Chinese government, the local government, the lack of money, and would like to stimulate the private capital to be involved in. So that's the way of public-private, a kind of partnership. That's not a kind of borrow, but a partnership to cooperate with each other, to share the risk with each other, and enjoying the profits between the two parties. So that's the way of this model. Okay. Yeah. And Dr. Gong, Fred, you've come here to study aging communication and new media. What does that mean?
Okay, actually there are, as you mentioned, two topics I'm interested in here in Troy University. The first one you mentioned about aging and communication. You know, aging is very important and very serious problem across the world, worldwide, no matter in developed countries, in developing countries, both are very important and serious, especially for developing countries like China. We have a very large population, you know, the base population very large, so the number of the older elderly will be, you know, more and more in the future. I can show you a figure. According to the United Nations, by the year 2100, right? 2100, there will be like 3 billion, you know, senior citizens. So this is a very huge number. I developed my interest in, you know, this topic from my own experience. You know, my parents, you know, grew older and older, and suddenly I find that on the bus in China, we often take bus. There are more and more older people, more and more senior citizens. That's why there are a lot of news in China about should we, you know, give a seat to the senior citizen. You know, there are sometimes there are, you know, quarrels or even fighting, you know, about this. So this is a very important. And the communication is very important, you know, during the process of getting old. According to the scholar, maybe there are at least two roles of communication. One is that communication defines, you know, the shifts of powers, you know, among people when they getting old, among the family members, among the colleagues, among the people around him or her. This is the first one, maybe the shifts of power. You know, the communication defines this. The second one is that through communication, we can more vividly, more explicitly know what the older people need through communication. Well, maybe I can come up with a third one, that is through communication. We can, older people can get used to in the process of getting old. And this is a natural phenomenon. and this is of course a social phenomenon, more easily. Everybody will be old someday. So aging and communication is not just targeted on the older people, but on all the people, including the young people.
So this isn't just about mass communication to older people, but rather finding ways to get older people to communicate their needs also.
Yes, you're right. Aging and communication includes some topics like the personal communication, and which includes like intergenerational communication, intergroup communication, things like that, and also mass communication, of course. So how the older people get information from the mass media, or how the mass media convey the information, especially the positive or good information to the older people, and help them have the healthy and successful aging. Yeah. And there are other topics also.
It strikes me that so very often we have visiting scholars who come here to study things like ESL, teaching English.
Right.
Not a surprise that someone would come to the United States to study that from China or from another country, or to do computer science, or we have a variety of things, and we've had a lot who've come here to study tourism and to think about how does tourism work in these other countries that we want to attract tourists from. But it seems to me that by happenstance, the three of you all are researching in areas where at the moment there is kind of massive social change or massive change in the way that things are happening in China. So, so there's a kind of traditional education system in China that's really, I think, over the last, at least the last decade, has really been sort of questioning itself and its approach and wanting to internationalize also, I know. And issues of like, what is the relationship between the government and private industry? And of course, now, especially in China particularly, there's why do you have so many older people? Because people are healthier and they're not, and are living longer. And so it's good news that you have so many more elderly to that way of thinking. So what do you think, I guess I'll just throw this out to anyone who wants to talk about, like, what do you think was the sort of situation in China that you saw in flux, and what did you hope to find when you came to the United States regarding your research area that you could take back and use in some way?
Yeah, the PPP model is a worldwide practice, actually, but the Europe countries could be the leader, especially the United Kingdom. Yeah, and the United States also take that kind of model, and I found some literatures here to explain the United States experience, and I'm also come here to take the advantage of the rich academic resources of Troy University to learn some experiences and problems, lessons, especially from the United Kingdom, because United Kingdom is the earliest and successful experience in the world for PPP model.
What were their early experiences, like the East India Company, that kind of
No.
Not that
Yeah,
early?
the PPP model started early in 1990s.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, 1990s. Yeah, because of the Conservative Party, they cannot take the full kind of privatization, but the government has very heavy debt at that time, so the practice the PPP model, and it gets success.
Do you think, I mean, what do you, I'm asking you to sort of guess about the future, but do you think that this model is going to become more prominent in local government in China, or?
Yeah, that's for local government, because the public service is the major duty for local government instead of the central government of China. Yeah, So that's why now our policy in China is to encouraging the government to involve the private capital in the provision of the public services.
And so do you think it's particularly of interest to local governments, or just your area of research is for local governments?
No, the PPP model is particularly for local government. Yeah.
One thing I know that Fred was telling me about a few days ago was about legacy media here, like radio. Right. And one of the things that he has learned with his advisor, Doc Kirby, is about local radio, and how this local radio is a very kind of different animal, I guess, than other kinds of media. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Okay.
Maybe how this intersects with what you've been doing?
Right. That's the second topic I'm interested in. So you stopped me, right? You stopped.
Oh, I was.
Stopped
Yes,
when I'm going to do that.
Okay.
Yes, I'm also interested in how the legacy media or traditional media survive in the age of new media. Nowadays, televisions, newspapers are fading away. Not like the 100 years ago when it was very prosperous. I happen to find out that here, local, radio, commercial radio, WTBF, right? Okay. It is about like 70 years history. It has maybe 70 years history, and it is very prosperous nowadays. So I think this is a very good example to show audience, to show the researchers how can a traditional media survive in this age of new media. I think they are after talking with the employees and Dr. Kirby, other employees in the radio station, I come up several ideas. For example, firstly, maybe the localism, or we can say it like hyper-localism. Hyper-localism is a journalistic term, which means that they only cover the local things, right? The local news, for example. Every member in this radio station is quite involved in the local affairs, and actually most of them are part-time there in the radio station, not the full-time ones. They have their own jobs, they have their own duties in other positions in the city. That's why they so involved in local life. This is the first strategy, maybe the hyper localism, right? I think this is very, very important. It's quite different from the radio station, the situation of the radio station back in China. I think this is a very important strategy they can borrow from to survive in the competitive industry.
Do you think that there's something about that hyper localism that is of particular interest to aging communication, or do you think that because the issue of aging communication is global, really, that hyper localism doesn't really have an impact on that?
You mean the hyper localism of media? This kind of tendency? I think hyper localism may help communication with the aging problem or the senior citizens, because according to the statistic, according to the survey, maybe older people like to watch TV, like the traditional media, and also they care more about the surroundings. What is going on in the neighborhood? Right.
If you've been living in the same neighborhood for 30 years, you're much more invested than if you've been living there 18 months.
Right. So the strategy of hyper localism may help the media, even the government, right? Even help the government to communicate with them and convey the information, not only through the mass media like the radio or television, but through the personal communication, the neighbors, right? You mentioned if you live here for 30 years, you must be very familiar with the neighborhood, right? So this is a very good way to try to convey the good information or the positive information. And also I want to combine the health problem, health information acquisition with the agent and communication problem. That's what I'm going to do in the future. And this, I have actually finished one of the topic, like how to convey or how to send the health information to the elderly, to the senior citizens. When I wrote my doctorate dissertation, okay, I have begun some of the a part of this kind of research. I will be going on with that.
Okay, Cora, when you first arrived, one of the things we talked about was, I think maybe in the first week that we met, you asked, how did you learn about critical thinking in school? And my answer was, I don't know. I guess we always had critical thinking as part of the curriculum. So how, the things that you've observed here, how can you return with that? What can you do with that when you go back to China?
I investigated several Chinese students in Troy University, and I asked them what's the biggest difficulty in their study, and they said maybe the express of their own opinion. They don't know how to do that. In Chinese culture, we are required to not to question our teacher or our parents. We should respect them, and including obedience. So I think for Chinese students, it's really difficult. So I'm taking the critical thinking skills class, and then I observe what the teachers do, what the teacher asks students. So how the students did in the class, and I think that's a little very helpful.
Do you think it's likely that this will be the kind of thing that's integrated into many classes, or that students will take a class that's just called critical thinking?
I think maybe they could take the critical thinking class, then they know how to practice their how to express their opinion, and then they can apply that for the other academic class.
I see. So I want to ask you, when you go back to China, what is the thing that, like, if you can sort of take this, I guess maybe not just the research experience, but the experience of, I think you've been here almost a year at this point, right?
Yeah.
And you've been here 6 months?
4.5 months.
Okay, and you've been here very little, two months, yes.
Right.
Well, what do you think you will probably take back with you?
For me, I think maybe I'm more courage. If in the past, if you ask me, Cora, are you interested in the interview on TV? I said, no, that's impossible. I'm afraid of this. But now, maybe I am affected by the American people, and I think, yeah, probably, maybe I could give it a try. So I think that's the most important for me.
Okay, so so just courage generally is the thing you'll take back with you? And how about you?
Yeah, for me, I think even though it's not very long, only 4.5 months, but I really get a lot from this visiting. So first of all, I think I am enriched by those academic resources in Troy University. Yeah, and it can enrich my. It would be very helpful for my future research. And also I attended the professors' classes, which I enjoyed very much. Yeah, and helpful for my teaching. That's good. And thirdly, I think the Troy University is very international. It's an international community. Yeah, I got a different international culture, the cultures from different countries in on this campus. Yeah, that impressed me.
Your school is a very large school, isn't it? As I recall, your school in China?
Yeah, Hainan University. Yeah,
yes.
That's a big university.
It's a really big school.
Yeah, it's really big.
And how big is the international community, would you say, at Hainan University? Do you have very many international students?
We have the students from abroad, from overseas, and one of my purpose for this visiting is to deliver classes for those international students after I get back. So, so this experience would really help for me for my teaching.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you?
Okay. Actually, I agree with you that for the culture things, right? I come here and witness a lot of different culture. Especially, I'm a little bit involved. I don't have a lot of time, but I'm a little bit involved in the local life and to feel the culture of the South, right? Culture South. Well, this is a very good experience for me. And the second, I think make a lot of friends here from different countries. The friendship is a thing I think I will bring back to China. Maybe people here are very nice. Before I came here, I listened to a radio program. They say the radio program is about maybe the culture of America. It's in California. People won't say, how are you doing, things like that, right? They just ignore you. They just walk around, right, and don't notice, the strangers. But here in Troy, people will say, how are you doing, right? Even though you are strangers. I think that's a very good thing.
And you're taking one other thing back with you to China,
Right?
which is
Southern hospitality.
well, also he's taking a baby back.
Right.
He has become a father for the second time
Yeah.
in a week ago, I suppose it would
Yeah,
be.
a
Not
week
very
ago.
long
Yeah,
ago.
okay.
So, so you'll always have that to. You'll always
Right.
take a little piece of America around with you wherever you go. So that's very nice, also.
Right. That's a good
And,
memory.
and please send her back to us in about 30 or 40 years to be a visiting scholar here herself. We would really
Okay.
appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Okay, it's good. And also, I want to take this opportunity to thank you guys for your help. Okay.
Yeah, me too. I'd like to show my great thanks to Professor Nokes.
Yeah.
You make our program very effective, productive. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. All I did was organize a few things, so but that's about all the time that we have now. So I would like to thank each of you for coming here, not just coming here today to to present your research to the broader community, but also for coming to Troy to introduce us to the way that you do things at your schools and your university to enrich our departments, and hopefully more of our students will come visit you, and you'll send your students here, and we'll have a fruitful exchange.
Yeah.
So that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us.